All right. Hi, everybody.
Hey, boss.
What's happening?
You are.
Beauty Mus. Mr. Schilling's in the house.
Hello, hello.
All right. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
Good.
All right. So let me just get this thing recording or make sure it's recording. And awesome. All right. So this is our elite mastermind group. I'm sure there'll be people that'll be kind of coming in as we go. But we're going to start on time. I posed a question before, and that was, hey, what is it that you all are, give me some challenges. Give me something that you all are interested in us masterminding about. And one topic I get a ton of, and it might not be by accident that it's right about tax season, right? That the accountants are going through and they're looking at everybody's expenses and trying to figure out tax bills and all that kind of stuff, that this topic continues to come up right now. But it was about expenses. And so I want to dig in today and talk a little bit about expenses. And this is a full-on participation. Some of you I think are probably really great at this. Some of you may be a little bit more challenged. I think the one thing for sure is that it takes a very special kind of mind to love being in the expenses and the P&Ls and all that kind of stuff, which I am definitely not that person. And it's one of the reasons that we have Darby Russell, and I've asked Darby, who is our accounting manager. She runs everything. So like when we talk about P&Ls, we talk about commission worksheets and like anything, finance, budgeting, any of it, Darby's our person. And so I've asked her to join us at the very least, just at the beginning stage of this conversation and this call, so that we can have some conversation with somebody that's actually kind of smart in that arena. So before we get too far into this, my goal here today is to talk a little bit about like what does it mean to be able to track expenses and where to start. Because if you guys are anything like me as a real estate agent, I spent a lot of my time. Well, the best way I can describe it is operating in fear, right? And that may not make a lot of sense to some of you, but early on, I didn't really know, for example, how much it cost me to operate my life. And so I just kept working. I just kept working my ass off. I worked harder and harder and harder and harder, and I just kept going and I kept going and I kept going. And what it did was it kept me from making some smarter business decisions. Some of you, I was really good at math. Like I think I'm a really good at math kind of individual. And yet accounting is a big challenge for me. It's the monotony and the detail that it just drives me absolutely crazy, right? So my hope today is that we're going to talk a little bit about why it's important that we get a handle, especially at this level. Again, this is the elite crew. And so, the expectation is that you guys are doing a lot of business, and these are real dollars we're talking about. So we're going to talk a little bit about why it's important that you get a handle on your expenses, why you understand, fixed versus variable, where you can have an impact, really dig a little into the tracking and measuring so that it ties it all together. And then of course we'll hit whatever parts of that you would like to in between. Is that fair? Awesome. Thank you, Dana. So again, full-on participation, need each of you to be sharing your experiences, and let's have some deep conversations on that. So Darby, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Oh gosh. So I have a bachelor's in accounting and I have a master's in organizational leadership, and my passion really is in the leadership with the numbers, right? So this is a good fit because like the leadership, and I want you guys to make money, and I want us to make money, and I want us to all be fiscally responsible, which is hard sometimes when you are going from like, you don't know when your next deal is, right? But you have those expenses continually every month. So how do you guys typically track your expenses right now?
QuickBooks.
QuickBooks? Awesome.
What about you, Eileen?
QuickBooks, and I also have this app for mileage. It's called Mileage Pro or something, and it just tracks where my phone goes, and then I can say it's business, and then I can itemize it as going on a listing or photography or whatever, and or personal. You just swipe left or right. Yeah.
Mileage IQ.
That's awesome.
The app is
Anybody
Mileage.
else using anything other than QuickBooks?
I have a tax bot that I use for mileage as well.
Jimmy, what do you use?
Sorry, QuickBooks.
QuickBooks. Everybody's using QuickBooks. Is that pretty helpful? Do you guys know how to run like your expenses and to see where you're spending your money? Eileen says no.
I think it would help maybe a conversation with you and or our accountant of different things that we can write off. I know that there is a little bit of tax change with the meals and entertainment.
Right.
I don't know if you know much about that, but before we could write off 50%, I don't know, I just give everything to my accountant and he lets me know what I owe. So
right.
It'd be nice to kind of know what it is that I'm doing right or doing wrong in my spending to know what I could write off.
Right. And I think it would probably be helpful before you get to the end of the year to know all of that stuff. So, you know, to be able to track that throughout the year and say, oh, I'm not at my minimum for meals and entertainment, you know, let's stop spending because I'm not going to meet it or whatever. That's certainly something, if you guys want to know those thresholds, that's certainly information I can gather together. If you want help setting, you know, up something in QuickBooks to go over your expenses, then I can help show you how to run a report that shows you where you're spending your money. Are you spending your money on marketing? Are you spending your money on mileage? Are you spending your money, where are you spending it? I can certainly help you guys do that. I think that would be a great, I don't know about you, Todd, I think that'd be a great service for the agents just to see where you're spending your money throughout the year, as opposed to getting to the end of the year and you just hand over your box or your receipts to your accountant, not knowing.
Right.
One thing that's been really helpful, Todd sent out the Tom Ferry, the tracking, and it breaks down all of my expenses. And then, you know, if I'm paying for marketing or an ad or Zillow or whatever I'm paying for, and then how many leads I got off of that advertising, and how much it breaks down to per lead. That has been incredible for me. I'm really excited about that program. I've never used anything like that. I've always tracked my expenses or tracked whether it was buyer or seller and what I was spending in and who, but that program was is phenomenal.
Is that awesome as far as being able to budget? As far as saying, like, if I can get this many leads, it's going to pay for itself?
Yes, yes. So it helps me track. It says I'm spending, you know, X $100 or $1,000 on, and I actually made changes to this year's budget based on what I did with Todd last year, which and eliminated some of my advertising that I could not show a single buyer or seller from, but it was promoting me as opposed to going out and getting new listings and new buyers. So it tracks a bit.
Is that a computer-based app or is that a paper tracking system that you have?
I'm a paper Nazi. I love paper, but it is a, Todd helped me as a
It's a Google spreadsheet. We're going to go over it here in just a second.
oh,
So
Google
I love it. So let me ask, these are sort of the steps that we're going to go through today. We're going to talk a little bit about budgeting. How many of you actually do budgets now? Okay. Do you do them both for your personal and for your business?
No,
I'm sorry?
No. I don't do them for both.
Okay. So you just do one for the entire tamale? Or is it
Uh,
just your?
I used to have an idea what I was doing for my business, but then this Google spreadsheet you sent me, where I had to completely rip down both my personal and my business. Again, that form was just life changing for me. So now I have a budget for both, but need to translate it into 18. Had things going on this year, so I couldn't do it. But so that's still on my list to budget for both. I think it's important for me to budget for both.
Yeah.
Did you think
anybody,
that was like I'm sorry,
go ahead.
Todd.
No,
Did you
you
think
go.
that was like a time-consuming thing, Janine? Or, I mean, is that one of the issues? It just takes a lot of time.
Oh no,
Or is that somebody could do pretty quickly?
If you have QuickBooks or from your accountant, you can quite literally take 2017, and I'm sure Todd's going to talk about this, and know exactly where your expenses were for 2017 in your business. And then your personal side should be pretty easy because we write off so much for our business. So it was consuming for me in the beginning to really just rip apart into detail what Todd had on his sheet. Yes, there we go. And to get each one, especially for the personal side and what's being paid personal, what's on the other. It was time well spent for me, and I haven't done this in particular, though I've done some of it. And I have it all written out when we did the goals for 2018. So now I just need to go through here. But it'll take a little bit of time, but it's worth every second once I got to this.
Gotcha.
In my opinion.
Okay.
So this is the monthly expense worksheet that she's talking about, and you can see it sort of breaks everything down. This one does both business. Let's see if I can go back up here. It starts with your personal expenses.
Todd, are you going to share that with us? I mean, I know you just screenshotted it, but can you share that whole spreadsheet?
Yes, and actually, whoever your coach is has this. But I will try to reshare it. I'm pretty sure that I have shared this with you before, so I might have to delete you and then re-invite you. So you can see, it's obviously changeable. This is all editable. When you get this, just do me a favor. Do a save as. Make yourself a copy and save it as yours. Otherwise, you're making changes to my master. And then it goes into the business side of the expenses and your advertising. So you've got reoccurring expenses versus non-reoccurring expenses, discretionary. So it's pretty, I mean, I want to call it exhaustive, but it's certainly, it's certainly got a lot of stuff to it. How's that? And its intent is to help you get back control over what you guys are spending. So here's a question for you.
Did you create that platform, or did you create that whole document, or is that something that was produced for you before you?
You're talking about all the different tabs, or just that one?
All of those different tabs and everything. That whole spreadsheet.
Some of them are stolen, and some of them I did.
Okay. Sorry. Thanks.
Yeah. I'm going to really encourage you to know what it costs you to operate your personal life. That's numero uno. Like, we don't do that. We don't go to work so that because it's, we'd rather be doing that. Like, there's other things we'd rather be doing. Let's be honest, right? We go to work because we want to be able to afford the lifestyle that we want. So it all comes back to your personal life. Super important to know what your budget has to be in order for you to have that life, right? Does that make sense? If I know that I have to make X number of dollars, I can build a plan around that, can't I? Okay.
It actually scared me when I did it because there were expenses I wasn't thinking about, and the end number was much higher than what I was making. So I had to adjust my goals.
And what's interesting is, so you get this realization, like Janine's talking about, like, oh my gosh, I'm playing too small. Like, I got to play bigger because my budget, like it's more. The opposite it happens as much, if not more, where people are like, holy smokes, wait a minute. That's all I have to make. That's all I have to earn in order to just, I'm just talking about live. I'm not talking about like I'm driving a Ferrari and I've got my fourth home in the Alps. Like, I'm just talking about basic living expenses. We get the same for the other way as well, right? And you can use that form, or as Janine was just talking about, you can use your QuickBooks. Darby is just, like that's what she works in, right? She's working in the budgets and the expenses and all that kind of stuff. Darby, can you give us any layman's, what's the best practice for creating a quick and dirty budget for our personal expenses?
For personal expenses?
Yeah.
So I personally don't like banking on income I know I'm not going to have every month. So, if you have a side job and you get $5,000 a month and real estate is not your consistent income coming in every month, I wouldn't count that as income, right? If you are pretty consistent.
You're talking about passive income. There are no part-time agents on this call, darling. I can assure
No
you.
part.
Yeah. But
Wow.
you're talking about passive income, like investment income?
Right.
Okay.
Gosh, I don't know. I like to remind people to pay attention to those expenses that you have auto drafted coming out of your account, especially like when it comes to your personal. So those little ones that add up, right? The $35 gym membership, the $85 Excel, like don't forget those just because they're auto drafted and you don't write those in your checkbook because you don't have to think about it. I mean, don't forget those because so many people don't write checks and you don't have that paper trail and you don't think about it. But those are things, that add up pretty quickly for that. And then I think for the income, like I always budget on the least, right? So when I'm on an hourly job, I never budget on a 40-hour work week. I'll budget on 35 hours, at the very least, because you just don't know. So don't budget on 4 closings a month, budget on the 2 and see what you can do from there. Because then that 1 month you don't make 4 closings, you're going to be okay. I very much like to understate my income because I don't want to set myself up for more income. Do you know what I mean? Because that month you overstay your income and you budget on that bigger income and you don't get it, you're going to get into some trouble.
Great. So kind of the process here, right? So we've got our budget. That's what we know we have to make on a personal basis in order to have the life that we want, right? So we create that, and then we can basically, you see the recurring versus non-recurring, fixed variable, like we can go back through our expenses now and we can determine which ones are going to happen. Like your mortgage payment, it's going to happen. Your car payment, it's going to happen. Those are fixed expenses. There's really nothing you can do with those. I know there are, but there's really nothing you can do with those. Those are not easily changed behaviors, right? Versus the variables are not just like, oh, my utility is going to be up sometime and down sometimes. It's not really what we're talking about. What we're really talking about are things that are that discretionary. That's why I like that form that I was just showing you, because it talks about discretionary and reoccurring, and that it breaks it down differently. But again, your expenses, these are real expenses. This is where you begin to sort of understand, all right, well, this is what I have to do, right? This is what I want. This is what I need. Here are the expenses. All of a sudden, I'm looking at these, and some of these expenses probably are not, they may not be what you thought they were, right? Like they may be, gosh, I'm spending a lot of time on fill in the blank. Or spending a lot of money on fill in the blank, right? So understanding the difference between the fixed and variables. Darby, is there like, how do you go about figuring out fixed versus variable expenses?
Well, I think the variable expenses, you're eating out, your gas, because we can always be better about those things, your shopping. So for you guys, I mean, it's going to be like the marketing, right? So what's the bare minimum marketing that you guys, need to do so that you can still sell? That's going to be like a variable, because you could spend, a CB3 package on one listing, or you could maybe get away with a CB3, or I'm sorry, vice versa. So that would be a variable one. But I think sometimes too, those, just really it's the going out that's the variable, right? Because sometimes we go out a lot more than we think. I think that's where the budget is helpful. Sometimes in my personal life, I don't realize that my son and I go to the movies as much as we do until I sit down and I balance my checkbook and I'm like, oh, we went to the picture show 3 times last month. Sweet. So staying on top of those things, because that's going to tell you what your variables are. Like, those things are going to change, right? Your 4 trips to Barnes & Noble, your movies. I think those things are the variables.
So using the marketing as an example, like, so those of you in Sun Valley, because that's what's in my head right now, like my variable marketing expenses are probably going to be the CB marketing packages, right? Because it's going to be based on whether or not I get a listing and how, all right, which one am I going to order? The ones that are fixed are, for example, that your magazine ad, right? I have 1 page in the magazine or 4 pages in the magazine or whatever it is, and I've made that commitment and I've got that all year long. That's going to get fixed, but they both fall in the same deal, right? Does that make sense?
And for the fixed, Todd, super simple. Your AVP is always going to be there. For the majority of the offices, your MLS is always going to be there. So those are your fixed income, or like those are your fixed expenses, right, guys? That base on your invoice every month, along with your mortgage, along with your car payment and your electricity. Those are the things that you have to pay for every month. Everything else is a variable. You don't know how many CB packages you might have. You don't know how many daily Sentinel ads you're going to get charged for. You have to keep track of those, so you're not surprised when you get your $1,500 invoice.
Todd, you could stop me from talking, but I found that I was spending a lot of money on going out and the dinners and entertainment and concert tickets and anything that put me in front of people or taking people to a live play. Ty, I'm sure it was something you sent me last year. And like today, I had somebody I was supposed to meet for dinner, and I asked her if she wanted to take off, grab a coffee, and go walk around Sun Valley. And we did that for an hour. I've done that 5 times this week for a total of $50, to buy each of us a coffee. And they're calling me back saying, oh my God, that was so much better than sitting, somewhere for lunch, because we got out, we got moving, we were talking, we went, looked at some things at Sun Valley. So I kind of switched, because I was spending insane numbers for lunches and dinners and whatnot that were not paying off, so to speak. And getting out and getting active with them seems to be something positive that they're enjoying.
Anybody else have any other experiences like that? There's a bunch of them.
So once you saw that, Janine, is that something you put in your budget every month? I'm going to spend $100 on leads as far as coffee and lunches and stuff like that.
Well, I dumbed it down with my going out. And so these are people that are within my sphere of influence, or I want to spend time with a couple times a month. And instead of sitting around, at lunch or coffee, we're also getting out and meeting people while we're out there. We just sat with coffee and sat next to some people after we went for a walk around Sun Valley. So my budget changed. I reduced my going out budget, and it's the same amount of time that I would be spending with them anyway. So they seem to be enjoying it. So yes, to answer your question, I reduced my budget for the entertainment aspect of it.
Great. And oftentimes it's just a matter of making it clear, right? Oftentimes it's just a matter of saying, hey, listen, this is where my money's going, right? Picture show or going to dinner or that kind of stuff. So that's awesome. How many of you have an expense line item for your taxes? That's an important one. And anybody that's gotten that bill and went, knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's huge, but I got to tell you, it's amazing how many agents don't put aside that money and get themselves into predicaments. So make sure that that ends up in there. So obviously being clear, and the exercise here is making sure that you're getting it down on paper so that you can see what it is and you can begin to internalize and digest which of these are necessities, which of them aren't. We have lots of expenses that are not necessities, but we want to do them anyway, which is totally fine. That's why we have the life that we want. But it's just understanding what they are so you can make a determination as you get into the next side, what kind of income you're willing to put the work in to get there, right? And this goes back to that plan. And that business plan that you all have already done, right? It tells you exactly how much money you want to make, where you, frankly, there's some expense line items in there if you did it completely. But at the very least, it takes you right down to how many phone calls you've got to make or how many connections you've got to make. This is where these two begin to merge, where you start going, okay, well, maybe I want to go ski. I think I just saw Dave Maloney. Are you on? Yeah, there you are. So Dave's driving me crazy right now. I don't know if anybody else is driving crazy, but every time I turn on Facebook, he's got some photo of him in waist-deep powder, and he's having too much damn fun, right? And it's starting to piss me off.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry. But my point is that you know, Dave's business operates based on the life that he wants. It may be different than somebody else's, but when you're looking at expense versus income, you're starting to realize, okay, now wait a minute, I can cut some of these expenses so that maybe I don't have to work as hard on the income side, or no, this is the kind of lifestyle I want. I'm going to have to do some things differently on the income side. That's that business plan. And I don't think we need to spend much time in there, right? We good on that? Or,
Hey, Todd, just real quick on that. So I know somebody else just said they go for a walk and all that, and they get out and meet, or they were going and doing lunches. But I skied on that big powder day a couple of days ago. I made 2 different real estate contacts that day.
Nice.
Like people that I had never met before. Now, whether any of them will ever go anywhere, I don't know. But, you know, I think that concept that, you know, if you don't have a budget to market and all that kind of stuff, well, get out there and do something, and where you might meet somebody.
Right. You can make it happen one way or the other, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, they're both good. Yeah, but
they're both good. Okay. All right. So do we want to spend any time talking about the plan? Or are we good? Okay. So what I really want to talk to you all about is, once you know what your number is, once you know how much it costs you to live, and you figured out how much revenue you have to generate in order to fill that, and I've got a business plan that tells me down to the number of phone calls, how do we determine whether or not we're on track? How do we hold ourselves accountable? How do we determine where we're going to allocate our resources? This could be money, it also could be time. How do we do that? How are you all, right? How are you all making determinations on where you're going to invest your resources?
I like to think that I look at my past performance and where I am making deals, and kind of focus on that.
All right, so where do you go to get that information, Robert?
Well, I look back at my last year's performance, and, you know, like, for instance, with Zillow, or my, what do you call it, the Premier Agent, and I brought in 3 different buyers this last year. So that's my return on investment, I guess.
Okay, so it's based on past, what? Is that like where your deals are coming from?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Closings, specific closings.
Okay. Okay, so past closings. And is there a place that information lives?
You know, pretty rudimentary. I go back to my MLS and just look at my closings and kind of just do that. Yeah. Pretty simple.
Okay. Who else?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if you can hear me. I keep a simple spreadsheet of basically all my closings over my entire career, so I can always, it has a few pieces of useful information. I try to track the source, but also, I can kind of look at which of those people, even 20 years later, might still own a property. That makes them a valuable resource to go back to. So just keeping a simple spreadsheet kind of accomplishes a couple things, allows me to track where my money's going every year, in terms of my splits and that kind of thing. And but it also is something I can always go back and reference for, which of these people still owns property in the valley and might be a prospect and somebody I should get back in touch with. But also, like if it came from a sphere of influence or, a Zillow thing or whatever, I try to keep track of that as well.
Okay. Anybody else use any kind of instrument that's helping them make determinations on where they're going to invest? Jimmy, you got $10,000 and you get to spend it on anything that you want to generate business for yourself. What are you going to spend it on?
You're asking me?
Is your name Jimmy?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that it was me and not Janine down there.
Oh,
so
no, it's Mr. Klieger.
Mr. Klieger. So I got $10,000 and I can spend it on anything that I want to spend it on. So
investment. You're going to invest this in your business.
So we're talking lead generation sources.
Okay.
So at this point, I am focused on lead generation sources and what those lead generation sources are. Right now, I would say since this is kind of so I'm gonna split it. I'm gonna do one, and I'm gonna go some check equity and probably invest in like Zillow and see what that return on investment is. Or so I'm just gonna throw Zillow out there as
so why?
As a possibility.
Why Zillow?
Well, I think, when you ask your common, your common customer and ask them, hey, where are you looking for property? Zillow seems to be the number one place that comes up.
Okay.
So I think between that and realtor.com, those are the two kind of common answers. And the second one I would do is now go with a little bit of a sweat equity and start farming and looking at farming some places here in the valley that aren't necessarily that everybody does it. There's some places here, Independence Ranch, some of those places I think a lot of agents are farming. And that's actually kind of what I'm doing right now, is trying to find some off the beaten path subdivisions that are not that I don't think are being farmed as heavily as some of the bigger ones are.
Okay, and so why farming?
Well, I think it gets you out in front of the community, and I think it's active. And so while you've got your email marketing, you've got your postcard marketing, actually walking out and knocking doors and saying, this is who I am, this is what I'm all about. I live in the Redlands just like you, and let me be your agent of choice.
Great.
So it puts you physically in front of people.
Okay. So you would do Zillow because you've spoken to potential prospects and they've said that that's where they're spending their time. You do farming because you think that will help get your name out.
It puts you in front of people and get your name out. Yep.
Right. So anybody else, what is it that you're doing to make a determination as to where you're going to invest in your business? Anybody go through any steps Any resources, any ideas?
So I looked back at the spreadsheet from last year that you have. I know I'm referring to this quite a bit, and I know we all have it, but it has hot leads in there so I can stay on top of who's been inquiring, because I'm starting to memory alphabet, so it keeps them in front of me, and it has the last day I talked to them. I had a question for Jimmy. Is he using geofarming? Because I've heard a couple people with our company using that. So I'm curious if that works. And then I went back and took my last, whatever it was, 10 years. And I've mentioned this before to our group that Sunset Magazine, back to going to put my money here or there. I picked an area to farm in, and all my sphere, anybody I've sold something to, I set them up on getting the Sunset Magazine, which is regional. And for realtors, one subscription costs $10 for a year. And you have to specifically ask for the realtor program. That alone, I sent out a couple hundred of them, and my phone has been exploding with past clients I hadn't touched base with. And that was one of the coffees that was set up after that. But that the list that you have in that spreadsheet, it forces me to say where each lead came from. And so I was able to go back and say, okay, this is working and this is not. So to focus whether it was Zillow or a mailer I sent or how I got the new listings.
Okay. Anybody else?
So to jump back on and answer your question real quick, Janine, I hit a title company up, and they provided that I got a program through the title company, and I went back and so the first thing I did was say, here's the price range of home that I'm looking for. That this is the market that I want to get in. And then the next thing I looked, and so that spit out a whole bunch of subdivisions. And that was, there's a lot of subdivisions in there. And I said, okay, now the next qualifier is, because people move on an average nationally every 5 to 7 years, now go through and look at average length of time that they've owned their home. And so that's kind of the next qualifier. Now, my third part of this is now going into the county assessors. And that's what I'm doing this week, is going to the county assessors and looking at those smaller subdivisions and checking each one of those homes just to see how long they've actually owned their homes. Now that'll tell me, okay, this is a marketable farm. This is, so that's a process that I'm going through right now and there's a couple locations that are just huge. And so I'm trying to stay away from those because everybody's in those. I'm not going to compete for those. I'm going to go for something that's a little bit smaller and off market or out of the way.
So there was a video that was put out today by Tom Ferry, and I want to say it was like the 12 top lead sources or something like that. Recommend that you watch that. Like, I don't care if you're in property management, if you're in commercial, if you're in residential, the lead sources are the lead sources, right? That's it. Period. End of story. And I thought that was a really good video, just as a reminder. And again, on this sheet, as Janine was just talking about, there's a list of a bunch. But here's the thing. Where you need to get inspired, right? We know we have to make X number of dollars. We know what our expenses are. We have this plan to make the income necessary. We've got to figure out a way to earn money, right? Because we're going to invest either our sweat or our check, but it's a return game, right? We're not going to just, okay, I'm going to sit here. I'm not going to invest any of my resources, and business is just going to come to me to get me what I want, right? We know that. Not this crew definitely knows that, right? This crew definitely understands how hard you have to work to be as lucky as you are, right? Like, that's the funniest part of this whole thing. The people that are in this elite group, we get that a lot, right? Oh, well, they just blah, blah, right? You all work your asses off. My question to you is, how are you monitoring? How are you being inspired? How are you coming up with the next idea or place you can invest your sweat or your check to help you get here. So we've got Zillow, and that was from surveying some clients. We've got farming, because you're trying to accomplish getting your name out, right? We know that past client sphere of influence is without question the number one. I'm surprised that that we didn't have anybody that piped in and said, hey, listen, I've got like 15 different ideas as to how I'm going to market to my past client sphere of influence, because I know there are several on this call that are amazing at it. What are some other areas that you would invest your money to help you get there?
I'm still looking to bring in an ISA because I'm not organized. My head blows, top of my head blows off watching all these numbers. I'm not wired that way. Fortunately,
Okay,
I have somebody in my family to do that.
Increase your conversion, right? So what you're saying is, hey, listen, I'm going to invest money in making sure that the leads that I generate turn into more appointments.
Absolutely.
Okay, I like that idea, right? Anybody else? Okay, let me ask a question.
Hey, Todd,
yeah, go ahead.
so it's Shannon. So one of those things that I've had it identified too over the last year is, and you hit it a little bit just a second ago, and that's my time. So we can calculate via spreadsheet or QuickBooks where our expenditures are going, but I look at it more as far as how much time is being spent in specific areas. So if I'm investing my time, to me, that's the same thing as investing my money. So, how much time do we spend and how do we calculate that return? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
As far as, okay. So, case in point, if I'm spending, say $300 on a marketing campaign or sending stuff out, how can I organically have more touches and spend my time in areas that I see higher returns? And I see, one of those things that we get caught up in is, Zillow is a perfect example where I could find, I could basically spend, probably 3/4 of my budget in Zillow, but that's not where 3/4 of my clients are going to come from, my buyers and sellers.
Okay.
So do I spend $3,000 and get a higher return by focusing on essentially 3/4 of where my clients are coming from, and that's my referral past client base. So yeah, especially if some of us that don't have a huge marketing budget at the very beginning of the year, we're still kind of calculating out that budget more or less, is how can we organically touch more people, invest in more people without it costing us a lot of money.
Okay, so this is awesome, right? So for those of you on this call, what's your experience? Like, how have you navigated what he's talking about, determining what's going to be my, what's going to be my sweat, what's going to be my check, what should I invest my time in? Who's done that? How do you figure that out?
Well, so me personally, I'm going to make sure everything that I'm doing, where if I just get a spreadsheet in front of me and then I calculate out my day. So I want to personally audit my day. So if I'm doing something, am I doing something that's worth $20 an hour? Or if I'm doing something worth $120 an hour? So I got to make sure that, my lead gen time is my $120 an hour moments when I'm stuffing, envelopes and doing stuff that, where I'd like to, basically have somebody else do it because it's not worth my time.
Yeah. Anybody have any tricks of the trade? So how you do that? So I'm trying to think, I'm looking at people on this call right now. I would say, if I were to average it out, I would say that on this call are probably somewhere between $300,000 to $500,000 producer GCI, right? Like if I were to look at all of your goals and stuff, probably maybe it's the median, I don't know. But if we just used $400,000, so I want to make $400,000 in 2018, what's your time worth?
$250, $300 an hour.
Okay. So normal work year, normal, I'm not sure that any of us qualify for that, but normal work year is somewhere between, it's 2,080 hours is what the number is, right? So that puts us at 192. So let's just call it $200 per hour, okay? So to Shannon's point, what kind of work are you going to do if you are truly committed to earning $400,000? It's definitely a long weekend and everybody's foggy today. What kind of work are you going to do? Or maybe it's easier for you to tell me what you're not going to do, right?
One of the big eye openers for me was time blocking. We talked about this on our coaching call, and just making sure that my schedule is filled up with things that are those money-making activities, and delegating the items that are not. So, it's super easy to think, I'm just going to run by real quick and throw this sign in the ground, but is that the best use of your time? Or I'm just going to work on this CMA real quick, and 30, 45 minutes later, is that the best use of your time? So, I think we all get sucked into things that are not the best use of time. It's a matter of recognizing it. And for me, the time blocking really made it clear what was and was not a good, valuable use of time.
Yeah. It just exposes it, right? All of a sudden you're looking at it and you're like, oh my gosh, because for those of you that haven't done time blocking, one of the exercises that we go through is we list out every single thing we do, both personally and professionally, each day, week, month, right? That's the first thing we do. We go back through our calendar, we list everything. And then we have this conversation, right? $200 an hour. All right, so which of this stuff on here is worth $200 an hour or better? And it's really eye-opening. It exposes all of these areas that I'm allocating my resource of time, maybe unintentionally, maybe I didn't know, right? That, gosh, I was spending all this time stuffing envelopes, and the bottom line is I'd pay somebody, $15 an hour to stuff envelopes so that I could reserve my $200 an hour time. So if I were going to invest my time or money, what return would I be expecting?
So if I'm hearing you right, Todd, can you work backwards just by, working backwards from where you want your goal to be at the very beginning of the year? So, if your goal is $400,000 a year, can you work backwards from 400,000 and then just identify to your time by that? Does that make sense? Okay,
yeah, keep going. Keep talking through that. So walk me through the math. I've got $400,000 in my calculator. how am I going to work backwards?
Yeah, so I guess divide it by the number of days, because in the business plan for Tom Ferry, I think there's a section in there about how many days out of the year are you going to work.
Right.
So I would just have that day divide it by that, and then how many days you're going to work at through, or excuse me, hours per day.
Okay,
And
so
then
that gets us
you-
that 2,080 hours, right?
Yep.
Okay. So 400,000 divided by 2,080, is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Okay, so that gets me the $192 an hour.
So I think that's where it would stop, wouldn't it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, my
think
question to you, how do you determine what your ROI is? Because it's one, whether it be time or money, right? We all want, we have to have some limits, right? We're saying, hey, listen, I know I'm going to have a bigger ROI on this one, a lower on this one, but in no uncertain terms am I going to ever go below this. Who's got that as part of their business plan right now? Janine, what are yours? What's your target return on investment?
As far as time or monetary?
Yes.
Both. So, I think it's good to identify because I use it more as an identifier, because just I don't want to get caught in that trap of saying, okay, well, am I going to see a real return on, my $196 an hour return on stuffing envelopes? So I use that more from an identifier than, have it part of my business plan.
Okay, so two different things. We've made a little bit of divergent. So let me stop you for 1 second. Here's a trick when you're talking about the hourly, right? So we're talking about having somebody stuff envelopes. Would you pay somebody $200 an hour to stuff envelopes?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Would you pay somebody $100 an hour to stuff envelopes?
No.
How about 50?
Nope.
25?
Sure. If
Okay.
He or she must be really good.
Really good, right? Okay, so 25 is your number, right? Okay, that's what you would pay for that job. So that's the value of that job. What's the value of your time? Shannon, what's the value of your time?
But the value of my time is still at $196 an hour.
Okay, but the minute you actually stuff envelopes, you're not accurate.
No, I'm at 25.
$25.
Yes.
Right. And so, but I mean, that's why we get into these numbers. I know some of the conversations are a little bit weird and uncomfortable, but if we do that, 25 times 2080, what you're really saying is that you want to make $52,000, not 400, right?
Correct.
Okay. So that's one trick to just be true to your hourly rate, because keep in mind, every time you are willing to do work that's less than the $200 an hour, you're committing to making less money than what was your goal. Does that make sense?
Yep. Okay.
So now when we have finances involved with our business and we know that we want to make 400, what's a reasonable expectation that if I spend $1, how much should it return to me?
$200, isn't it? Isn't that what you should?
If you invest $1, you want $200 back.
Sure.
I want that deal.
Great return. Yeah.
Great. Right. Okay. Anybody else?
I think if you target 10 to 1, that's reasonable, I think.
Okay. So yours is 10. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So for $1 spent, you want $10 back. Love it. Anybody else? Okay, well, let's play this game. All right. How many of you would give me $1 if I would give you $9 back? Show of hands, all right? Okay, so that's pretty much everybody. Okay,
Deal.
How many of you would give me $1, I'll give you $8 back? Okay, how about $7 back? David's going for his money. He can't find $1. He only carries hundreds. Yeah, there you go. He's in, Dave's in. All right, so how about $6? You give me $1, I'll give you $6 back. Show of hands. Only 2. Well, okay, 3. There's 3 of you. Oh, okay. All right.
Depends on what I have to do to get it.
How about 4? So you give me $1 for me to give you 4 back. Okay. All right. How about 3?
I do too. It'd be 20% of my money.
Okay.
100%.
Okay, so understand then what you're saying is that you're willing to invest $1 if you can double it, right? Okay. Here's the trick. Over what period of time? Over what period of time?
6 months.
6 months. Okay. Anybody else? What do you think is a reasonable expectation to determine whether or not a lead generating source or an investment is returning what you expected or not? I got 6 months. Anybody else?
I would say at least 90 days.
Okay. Hey, Darby, I'm sorry. Yeah, darling, you're well. I didn't realize you were still there. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I didn't know when I was supposed to jump off, and I was like, I have to finish these budgets.
I just got to talking. I'm really sorry.
That's
Thank
okay.
you for being
Bye,
here.
everybody. Thanks, Ted.
Bye. Okay, so
Hey,
6
Todd,
months.
one thing that I face is like with the Zillow, those lead generations. I've done 2 years where I didn't get much, but then in the last 6 months, shucks, it threw that ROI right out, skyrocket.
So let's talk about that for a second. Do you mind? Can I
Sure.
use that as a case study?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So you've been using Zillow for how many months or years?
Oh gosh, at least 3 years.
Okay, so 36 months, right? Okay, so and how much do you spend each month?
$250.
Okay, so $250, right? And over the course of 36 months, how much money have you put in your pocket?
All right, let me just go. It'll be easier to go over the last year. That'd be 70,000.
70 grand.
Yep.
Okay, so what's your return on investment?
Well, let's figure it out.
Hey, Todd, I'm going to have to bug out here in a second. I got to go meet clients, but.
All right, buddy.
Probably a five times return.
Okay, well, if you're spending $250 per month, you've spent $9,000 on it, and you've made 70.
I'm sorry, I was thinking 50,000. Sorry about that.
Okay. 50?
Yeah, that's what I was calculating that.
Oh, okay, so 5 times then turned out
7 times.
So it's 5 times. So here's the thing, right? So I had this gal. She's a New York real estate agent, and she made like $140,000 the year before I started coaching her. And I asked her, I said, so you know, she was always talking about how busy she was. I'm so busy. I'm so busy. I'm so busy. And I was like, geez, lady, you made $146,000. Like, seriously, how busy could you really be? Right. And what we found out was that she was relying largely on these online sources. And so we began to ask the question, just like Shannon brought up, okay, what's the best return on investment of your time and money? And all of a sudden you go, okay, so her return on investment, I think, was probably similar. But you know what? It was sucking the life out of her. It was taking all the time. She was literally spending her entire time responding to these. So here's the question, right? You take the time and you take the money and you go, okay, well, I'm spending all this time because by the way, she was generating about 200 to 250 Zillow leads a month that she was, and Jim, this will make your skin crawl, right? She was having to call over and over and over and over and over again, right? Mm. So we simply said, hey, I wonder if there's another place that is a better use of my time and a better use of my money, right? And knowing full well, like, what's the number one source for leads? Past client sphere of influence, right? Past client sphere of influence. Next one is what? Open houses. Next one is not geographic farming, but farming of some sort. And then the last one on the list is online lead gen. So she literally canceled all of her online lead sources and took that time and money and invested it in that order: past client sphere of influence, open houses. She had $430,000 in GCI last year, right? The only thing she changed was where she was investing her time and her money. Do you understand how important this is when we start talking about, you got to know your numbers, you got to know your numbers? Okay, so let's tie that whole thing back together then, right? If I've got a budget and I know exactly what it is that I need to make in order to have the life that I want, from there, I can very quickly figure out what expenses I'm going to have in order to do that. I already have my plan. Maybe I need to go back and adjust my plan. Hey, listen, folks, some of you are going to say, gosh, you know what? I need to make less money. Here, I thought I needed to be $1 million GCI person. I don't really need to be that person. I can settle for 600, right? Going into your investment and really starting to then understand that your time and your money are so valuable, you really do have to get serious about understanding where your best use of time is and where your best return on investment is. I think if I remember back, Janine, I believe that yours target was 10 and you had the time and said 3, but 2. Like, now we're going to adjust it. We're going to say, hey, listen, under no uncertain terms am I ever going to invest in any kind of a lead gen marketing system, whatever, that doesn't at least double my money. But my target at the end of the year is going to be 10x. And I'm going to judge all of my investments on a 6-month clock, right? Now, that wouldn't work for Robert, right? Because it took Robert 3 years to make his 50,000, but he made it, and that's awesome, right? Does that all make sense? Tie it all together. Now, here's a question for you. How in the hell do you keep track of that stuff? Robert, so here's the problem with Robert. Let's call Robert out a little bit, shall we? Can we call you out a little bit? Like, you look so rested and relaxed. You've been on vacation way too much, right?
Oh, no.
All right. Is it okay if I beat up on you a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. So Robert is in a marketplace where the average sales price is a little absurd, right? And so he can do 10, 15 deals a year and just crush it. So it's easy for him to think back and he's like, oh yeah, 123 Main Street and the Johnsons and the blah, blah, and that one came from here and that one came from here. The rest of us, we're having to do more deal flow than that, right? We got to do 30, we got to do 50 transactions. Tracking and measuring is absolutely the most critical piece of this, because we can talk all day long about the importance of knowing what, knowing how much, knowing how I'm going to earn that money, and then what ideas I have and what my expectations are. But now I've got to track and measure it. So I'm going to go through this little form with you all right now. And I think we've got 10 more minutes. All right. So I'm going to spend the last, I'll jam through it unless you all have questions. I'll jam through it here in less than 10 minutes. If you want to stop me and ask questions, please do so. All right. Okay. Okay, so how many of you are using the production tracker? What's great about the production tracker is you've got a section for active listings, you've got a section for pending, you've got a section for closed transactions, right? It's got everything. What type of property? Did you represent the seller? Did you represent the buyer? What was the closing date? What was the list price? What was the selling price? How much did you make? What was the split? Referral paid out. What was the net commission to you, right? The net commission to you. And then this handy dandy little guy right here, source of business. Super important, right? Knowing the source. And y'all, I know that it's easy for us to say, hey, listen, you know what, I know where my business comes from. It just doesn't work. Trust me, I've watched it happen over and over. There's a difference between, you know, oh, well, that person was just a past client of mine. That's great. And while I appreciate that, where did they come from? What was it that got them to finally pick the phone up and say, hey, you know what? Sally and I have been thinking about selling our house, right? It could have been a postcard. All right. So that's that. Here's your daily tracker. So the daily tracker is awesome. It just tells you straight up what kind of work are you doing, right? Past client sphere of influence, lead follow-up, new lead generation, hour of power, listing appointment, listings taken, listings sold, buyer appointments, and buyer sold. And this will track completely through the entire year. We went through your monthly expenses. Again, use this. This is fantastic. But one of the best parts of this document is your return on return on investment. So this is your lead tracking, and I can simply put in here, right? We'll do. Well, let's just do this. We'll do Robert's Zillow, where he spent $9,000, right? And we'll say that during that period of time, Robert, do you, off the top of your head, how many leads do you think you generated in that 3-year period?
Probably brought in over 3 years, 20 leads. It's pretty low.
Okay, so 20 leads, right? Number of contracts.
That's 4 just last year alone. I'm sorry I didn't go to the other years before.
That's okay. How many closings?
That was 4.
Okay, 4 closings. Okay. Total gross commission was 50,000.
Actually, yeah. Well, 70,000 actually.
Okay, 70,000. All right. Okay. So do you see how that auto populates? So you can now tell, hey, listen, I spent $9,000. Just going to keep that track, keep total. You've got your annual totals right up here. Okay. You know now that you got 4 contracts at it. You had 4 closings, which is fantastic. No cancellations. Your cost per lead on Zillow is $450 per lead. Your cost per closing is $22,500. So you had a return of $61,000 on what you spent. Is that good?
Yes.
I can't see the whole document. Can you move it to the right where it says net. It's not showing what the net for us. There you go. Thank you.
You're welcome. Folks, this one is huge. And I think this is the one that Janine was talking about that was really kind of a game changer, because all of a sudden you start looking at this and you realize very quickly, holy smokes, man, I've got some places where I've been allocating some very precious resources. They're not returning, but boy, with a little tweak here and a little tweak there, I can very, very quickly turn my, $10,000 into $100,000, and that's what it's all about, right? If we each had 4 lead sources that generated 10x, we'd be doing pretty well, right? Everybody would write a check out today. Here's my 40 grand, just pay me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions about this stuff?
Can you send me that spreadsheet?
Yes. Yeah, I will. I'll make sure that everybody gets this on the elite group. I think many of you already have this. So, but again, I'll make sure this gets sent out to everybody. And hopefully you get some value out of this. I know for me, like my personality type, this stuff is excruciating. So I don't want you to think that like you're the only one that doesn't like this kind of stuff. You're not, right? I don't know if I'm good company or not, but I'm company nonetheless. And not everybody's mind works this way, but it is without question one of the most liberating and important parts of your business is to know how much money I got to make, how much my expenses are, and where I might be able to mitigate some of those, have a plan that I believe in, which is what we did in November and December, right? Really understand that I'm going to have to invest both time and money in my business. Where am I going to do that? And then how am I going to track and measure that? All right. Any questions for me before we go? All right, y'all. Thank you very much for your time. I know it's precious, so I'll talk to y'all later.